Dreamers. Imagine coming to the United States of America at the age of 11. Such was the case with Juan Escalante. He was recently featured in the New York Times, and he's been fighting the good fight for immigration reform for quite some time. And it was really a pleasure for me to be able to speak with him today. My apologies for the audio quality. It's not that great, but still the content itself is great. So I hope you enjoy the show. I asked Juan, if you had to define yourself in the third person, how would you do so? What makes you, you?
He's been doing immigration work for the past 10 years after he realized that he was undocumented, and for a significant portion of his life, he's just dedicated every single spare second to this cause in order to raise awareness about a lot of the struggles that immigrants and undocumented immigrants go through in order to navigate the United States system, immigration system, and as well, how does the pursuit of the American dream actually look like when it's not portrayed through the lens of a film or a movie that you may go see at a theater. Juan also likes Hawaiian pizza and black coffee, so he's a very cool guy. He likes to strike up conversations whenever, but he also prefers his laptop and Twitter quite a bit.
I told Juan that I could definitely relate with him on the coffee bit and quoted a line from Twin Peaks. I'll take my coffee black as midnight on a moonless night.
Ooh, I always say that, I like my coffee black like my soul, and my mother always says, don't say that, you're going to go to hell. And I'm like, well, that's a joke. It's funny.
The next question I ask Juan is, how does the removal of DACA affect him? How does all of this affect him?
Yeah, well, I think, part of the complication here when it comes to immigration and DACA and all these sort of things, essentially like the lack of information or perspective that people often have about this kind of stuff, right? Through the years, I've engaged with conversations where I've asked people, how do you get a social security number? Or if you wanted to apply for U.S. citizenship, what office do you go to? And often what you find is that because, U.S. citizens, natural born citizens don't often have to go or experience those specific circumstances throughout their lives, they don't have a readily available answer. To them, it's just sometimes or more often than not, it's an application that you may get at the post office and just send it through. For me, the DACA, situation, the DACA program as a whole, it's obviously something that has been abstract, or I've witnessed it be abstract in the minds of a lot of my friends and colleagues. And I say this because DACA, as a word, is already an acronym for the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program that was initiated by President Obama in 2012. And what the program does, and what it does for people like myself and close to 800,000 other people across the United States, is that it provides us with three basic things. Number one, a work permit. Number two, the ability to obtain a driver's license in our respective states of residency. And number three, it shields us from deportation for up to 2 years at a time. And I think what's important about that is the 2 years. Every 2 years, people have to go to the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services Office, or otherwise known as USCIS, which is what I like to call the big pushing arm of the Department of Homeland Security, file an application, meet a very specific set of criteria, like entered the United States before you were 16, have resided in the United States before the year 2007, prove that you lived in the United States for 5 continuous years without interruption. And you have to essentially surrender a lot of personal information to back a lot of your claims, right? For me, it was bank statements. For other people, and this is true, it's video game receipts, because, they didn't have a bank account and they just purchased everything with cash.
I had to interrupt Juan right here and ask him to elaborate on the video games.
Video games, like somebody literally got it from GameStop. Yeah. Because wow. I think another one of the very specific things is that in order to qualify for this program, you need to prove that you were present in the United States the day the president made the announcement. So that was June 15, 2012. And this young man, and this was reported by a gaming blog, I think the title of it, Kotaku. And anyways, this young man didn't have anything to prove that he was physically in the United States. And he came up with a receipt where he had bought like an Xbox membership or something like that or another. And that's what allowed him to enter into the program. But to kind of get into the meat of things, this program is renewable every 2 years, which means that after meeting the criteria, sending the application in, which, carries a fee of $465. Then the fee currently went up in price. It's now $495. That's just purely the fee. If you choose to hire an attorney to represent you or to help you out with the paperwork, you may incur other legal costs.
I had to just confirm here that it was every 2 years that they had to pay that fee.
Every 2 years. And then imagine on top of that as well, having to pay for a driver's license 2 years. I often tell my friends that I've had more driver's licenses probably than even you by this point in my life because of how many of them I've been have to renew. I'm about to renew mine probably in a couple of months after my renewal process kicks in again. So you're subjected to a background check. So the Department of Homeland Security takes all your information, subjects you to a background check, and if you're approved, then you're into the program and you get 3 benefits that I mentioned at the top. And then you're able to kind of coordinate your life in 2 years at a time, because then you have to start the process all over again. And, one of the big caveats of this whole thing, outside of the benefits is also the timeline. If you renew and for some reason there's a clog in the system or the application is not renewed right on time, you could essentially time out of this program for a very brief period of time, which could be a couple of days, a couple of weeks. I've heard people that timed out of this program for a couple of months, and your work permit expires, your driver's license expires, you could get fired from your job. You're not shielded from deportation for that brevity of time. And, it carries very real life consequences for a lot of people. And I think that when you really put all those things, on a bigger screen and you kind of see the impact, you're talking about the ability to drive, the ability to work, the ability to exist without the constant fear of potentially being deported. All those things weigh on you, physically and psychologically. And at the same time, you're expected to perform just as good, if not better, than your American counterpart, because there's no way for you as a DACA beneficiary or a beneficiary of this program to obtain legal permanent residency, or that means a green card, or become a U.S. citizen. Like there's no secret passage. There's no obstacle course that you have to, jump over. There just isn't a pathway, period.
Now, in keeping with the theme of this podcast, In the Shoes of, go ahead and imagine what that would be like, coming to a new country as a kid, and then finding out, well, it was actually good news that you had this new program, but it was still, you are having to renew something every 2 years, and nothing is really that stable for you. And you do have to work just as hard, if not a lot harder, let's be honest. So my obvious next question was to find out, well, what's going on right now, and how does it affect you? What's Trump doing exactly? What has he done? And I was actually showing my ignorance in my question to him about, what is actually going on here? And how are you affected by this?
Yeah, well, I think taking a step back actually, I look back in the past couple of weeks, the DACA program has been terminated by President Donald Trump. This was mainly a directive that came as a result of a threat of a lawsuit by several states, Republican-led states, and their attorney generals, essentially telling the president that if he did not end the program by an arbitrary deadline that they set up, which in this case was September 5th, that they would sue him and take the case to court, and that they were confident that the courts would, terminate the program for them.
All right, this kind of had me a little bit confused. I hadn't known that some states were attempting to sue Trump and saying he had to do something by a certain deadline. So I asked Juan to just elaborate on that.
Yeah, you're talking about 9 states led by Texas. Texas specifically, their Attorney General, Ken Paxton, who was essentially, the main leader of this coalition of states. I guess it's important to note that towards the end of this, as we approach this deadline, I should say, September 5th, one of those states, Tennessee, their Attorney General, whose name escapes me at the top at this moment,
Herbert Slattery III. I had to look that one up.
Backed off. So he dropped himself off from the lawsuit.
Gotcha.
Due to a lot of significant pressure from a lot of his constituents and from a lot of residents of the state. This lawsuit exists. It's a threat that has been issued against the Trump administration for a week to the lead up. So the first week of September. So I would say from August 30th to September 5th, there's all these maneuvers, from the press and from people and speculation as to whether or not he's going to terminate the program, how he's going to terminate it. And again, for those who are not familiar with, the immigration process, there's a lot of fear going around because people have bought homes through these past 5 years and the program has been in place. They lease cars. Like I have a leased Toyota Corolla under my name. They have school loans, credit card debt, and some of them are helping their parents pay their mortgages, or they're paying their own mortgages. And every single day it was like this fire drill exercise because nobody really knew if Donald Trump was really going to end the program, A. And two, what were going to be the conditions, right? Was there going to be a delay like the one that exists right now where, the program has ended, but the president has given a 6-month window for Congress to take legislative action and say, we're going to pass a legislative solution. And I'll get to that in a second. But, was he just going to terminate it altogether and said the people who've renewed up to this point, they can keep their permits, and the people who haven't renewed, then that's it. The people who have been fingerprinted, for their renewals, I guess I missed that in the introduction. Yeah, you have to be fingerprinted, by the federal government in order to obtain this benefit. You can finish their renewal, and the people who haven't been fingerprinted. So there's all these scenarios that, I have gained out in my head, and multiple people have gained out in their heads about how this is going to play out. And it wasn't until, September 5th when we found out that the president will terminate the program with a 6-month window where people are allowed to essentially renew their program. Their permit, saying essentially if your permit expires, before March 5th, again, another arbitrary deadline that's been set up here, you can renew that permit as long as you submit your application by October 5th of this year. So you're talking about this window of time. So if your permit were to expire, say, March 6th, you can't renew. That's just it. I guess to kind of take it to the next level, just so that people really fully grasp the urgency of this. That's only if your permit expires before March 5th.
Okay, so just in case you're a little bit lost, if your permit expires before March 5th, then you can go ahead and renew. You have until October 5th to renew it, and you'll have another 2 years. However, if it expires after March 5th, March 6th, and beyond of 2018, then you can't renew at this point in time.
So, for example, say that your driver's license, and I'll put it in terms so that people can visualize it. If your driver's license were to expire before March 5th, then the government says you can renew this driver's license as long as you come back to us with the renewal fee, the renewal application, and all the details that come back with it. Again, make sure that you have your paperwork in order and everything else that comes along with it by October 5th of this year. And remember, the program ended September 5th. They're saying that you have a month essentially between September 5th and October 5th, if you qualify for the renewal, to get it all done. So you can expect a couple of things. One, this limits the amount of applications of renewals for a lot of people. If your permit expires and if your, quote unquote driver's license was to expire in April or May, you don't qualify for this renewal, period. If you do, then you get 2 extra years. But this leaves up a significant portion of the DACA beneficiaries out of the possibility of A, applying for renewal, but B, at least a 6-month window for Congress, a Congress that has seen multiple iterations of bills to address this very same problem for the past 16 years. And I'm talking about a bill known as the DREAM Act, and having acted on it, one, and two, a Congress that can, that still has to, pass any sort of meaningful piece of legislation in, the beginning of this administration, this first year. So, I think what really needs to be understood here is that President Trump caved to the pressure of 6 states, and instead of ordering his attorney general, he appointed himself to go and defend the program in court. He caved under the pressure of the threat of a lawsuit, A, and then B, he ended this program without a legislative solution to address the problem.
Just a reminder that this was recorded on September 20th of 2017, and I'm doing some post edits right now on September 24th, 2017. So things may have changed by the time you listen to this episode.
And that opens up all kinds of issues, not just because of the possibility that people are going to lose their work permit and they're, potentially going to be exposed to be deported. Two things that have been mentioned by Department of Homeland Security officials saying that if their permit expires, they're going to be treated like other undocumented immigrants, so they could be subject to deportation. But the president, in the meantime, has also tweeted out, something that if Congress doesn't take action in this 6 months, that he will go ahead, right? And then he will revisit the issue. So why does he need to revisit the issue? If he could have just left the program along, go along, and then tell Congress that they have a timeline to pass the legislative solution. What he essentially did was, this very thin tactic of, repeal and replace. What he did was that he repealed and he has to replace. And there's no certainty that there's going to be a replacement unless we ourselves go out there and, as DACA beneficiaries and as a community and as a country and fight for this. And that's why you're seeing all kinds of outpour support from celebrities like, all the way from Cher to the Kardashians and anybody in between, and business leaders from anywhere from the CEOs of Target, Walmart, and even Tim Cook at Apple are saying that this is the issue of our time.
The issue of our time. So a lot of things came to my mind as Juan was talking about all of these things. One, I thought about all of the things that have been happening just across the nation, and to be honest with you, on a global scale as well. I'll try to leave my own political commentary and bias out of it, although it's probably pretty obvious. But despite whatever loud shouts, huge marches, etc. that we do, it seems that things just keep happening that are quite honestly regressive and not beneficial for society. So I asked him about that, and I asked him what's going to happen if, they don't replace it. I mean, we're talking about almost 1 million people here. What will happen? And to add on to that, will it result in more of a, type of police state? And his answer was very revealing and, to be honest with you, pretty scary.
Yeah, so good question. I think that there's multiple things to unpack here. One, the federal government has my information, right? They know where I live. They know who I am. And I surrender all this information to them in good faith, right? That I would give them all the information and subject myself to a background check if, in exchange, they gave me this benefit. And also with the understanding that none of that information was going to be used for enforcement purposes, right? So that, even though that I was willingly surrendering all this personal information, that they weren't going to come after me, and use it against me. I guess, if Congress fails to act in 6 months and the president doesn't follow through his promise of quote unquote revisiting the issue, take that as you may, you could essentially already see a lot of what's happening around the country. You're seeing mothers and fathers being taken away from the U.S. citizen children because of a parking ticket. Grandmothers, nurses, individuals who, have built a life here in their country and, all they lack is a piece of paper. And they're being deported to a country that they haven't seen in decades, or that they may fear, for their safety in. I was reading something today in the Sacramento Bee, today as in September 20th, and the article is up there right now on their website about a man who feared deportation back to his native country, and I believe this country was Mexico. And the family said, quite frankly to the authorities, that if they deported the man, that he will be killed in Mexico. And guess what happened? The man was, is reportedly dead in Mexico. And I can't tell you, the full details of it because of this. I'm halfway through the article, but I invite everybody that's listening to this to take a look at this. And these are the real life consequences of what happened.
Yeah.
And what we're talking about here, to take it a step further and let it sink in, I'm 28 years old. I came to the United States when I was 11. I spent 17 years of my life growing up in this country, paying taxes. I went to school here, middle school to high school. I have a degree in political science from Florida State University. I have a master's in public administration from Florida State University. And, time and time again, what I've been told, by this government, and by Congress, that, the authorities that refuse to address this issue, when it comes to the dreamers, the so-called dreamers, people like myself, undocumented youth, is that, we can get our act together so that you can essentially fully integrate yourself to our economy and to our country, even though this is the country that you grew up in. And, I guess to fully answer your question is, I'll let everybody listening to this podcast be the judge of it. If you look very close to the news as to who is really being deported, and I don't mean the quote unquote bad hombres that Donald Trump, always, brags about being deported. No, I'm talking about, families. I'm talking about children. I'm talking about parents whose crime is, again, a parking ticket. And then couple that up with the idea that the federal government has access to the information of these 800,000 people. And again, go out there and take a look at some of these stories. You're talking about doctors. You're talking about PhD students. If you go to on our website, americasvoice.org, which is, the organization that I work for, we often highlight the accomplishments and the stories of these young people. And these are young people that the Trump administration is going to waste taxpayer dollars to go after. It's not only, cruel, but it's by every definition, insane. This is the kind of people that you want to integrate. They're more often than not bilingual. They understand our political structure. They want to continue to get an education, and they want to contribute back to their communities. Like, I just don't understand what the logic is that the Trump administration is. And, I'll say, a lot of my political opinions, and I keep them to myself. But
I remind Juan at this point in time that he can feel free to express any political opinion that he has. But anyway, he does a pretty good job of keeping it very diplomatic, in my opinion.
It's nonsensical, and I'll leave it at that. And I'll leave it at that because, I fully believe and respect that, in order to fix this issue, when we talk about immigration, and this is primarily why I'm restraining myself from voicing, political opinions, even though that obviously they may be quite obvious to the acute listener, but
yeah, I think from both of us, yeah.
Yeah. I mainly say this, and I say this in the most sincere way because, going to college and, often being, interviewed and questioned and putting myself out there in the public eye like the way that I do. I will say that I'm a firm believer that the only way that we're going to get through this is through talking. And I mean that in the way that we need to have very civil, honest conversations about what exactly is happening with our government, how these enforcement techniques are being applied, how much they're costing us as a nation, and what is the sensible approach to enforcing our immigration laws, that haven't been updated in decades, and how can we as a nation come together and understand this issue and make sure that we're not just being pushed, to understand this extreme rhetoric that gets fed to us by hate groups, by, the neo-Nazis, the alt-right or whatever it is that you want to subscribe to, but really dig in and see the issue and understand that, are there immigrants who in this country don't speak English? Yeah, my parents don't speak English. Are they bad people? No. Do they wish that they could have the opportunity to take a break from work and go and actually learn a new language? Yeah. But guess what? They don't have the luxury of taking a vacation or stopping from work because they're so concerned about being so right of the law that they're going out there and working weekends to make sure that they, A, make ends meet, and B, to make sure that they continue to provide and cover all their accounts because they don't want to leave and be deported back to Venezuela, which is our home country, and a country that, quite frankly, is undergoing some significant political and economic turmoil right now. So, I guess that's just kind of like my overview for everything is that this is way bigger than just myself because I can tell you my whole story and why I don't want to be deported back to Venezuela and why I don't feel that's right. But just like my story, there's almost a million other stories out there whose, accomplishments, reasons for not willing to go back to their home country are way broader and, in some cases, potentially even more impressive than mine. But what it really boils down to, the humanity concept of this, A, the economics of this, how much will it cost to remove 800,000 people from this country? And then B, whether or not we're a country that's willing to recognize the talent and the opportunities of, holding on to this workforce and giving them an opportunity to, use their talents to continue to improve our nation. At the same time that Donald Trump is saying that he wants to pass a bill called, the Race Act that will limit legal immigration in this country by only allowing the best and the brightest, by making sure that they speak English, that they have advanced degrees. And when you look at this, when you contrast one thing to the other, and I'm not trying to make a case for that bill. It's horrible. I invite everybody to take a look at it, and it will do some severe damage, not only to our immigration system, but also to our nation as a whole. But rather, what I encourage everybody to take a look at is essentially like, who are the people? What are their faces? What are their stories? What are their dreams and hopes? And what are they doing right now? You know, I mentioned earlier, I'm 28 years old. I've been doing this for 10 years. So when I started being an immigration advocate, I was 17 years old, fresh out of high school. And the reason why I became an immigration advocate was because I got a call from my college. They told me that, you know, we don't have the copy of your green card. And after asking my mother for that document, she, you know, so she put me in a car. We drove to the nearest college. And I remember vividly, you know, a young woman who was very nice telling her from across the table, you know, with a chart in her hand saying, if you have a green card, you're going to pay this much, which is in-state tuition. If you don't have a green card, you're going to pay this much, which is out-of-state tuition, 3 times as much. You don't qualify for scholarships. You don't qualify for federal assistance. You don't qualify for state assistance. And you're essentially going to have to pay out of this pocket. My mother was crushed that day. And she hugged me, leaving that office, crying. And that was the moment that I decided that I was going to do something about this, because I could just not let my parents' sacrifice go out in vain. We're talking about 2007. There was no DACA program. There was no in-state tuition. And, you know, the Dream Life was essentially like a far different thing. And now, you know, 10 years later, I find myself, you know, answering some of the same basic questions that I had back then before younger DACA beneficiaries who right now are going to school, are working full part-time, and they're scared for their lives. You know, they embark themselves into these journeys, you know, trusting that this program is going to be, even though temporary, it's going to give them enough momentum to cross that stage or get that promotion or save up enough money to help their family out. And now the rug is being pulled from underneath them. And, you know, I recommit myself, you know, to make sure that even though I do fall into this older spectrum, and even though that, yes, I was able to accomplish my dreams and get those 2 degrees, that I'm not going to let those kids down by any stretch of the imagination. And just like I won't let them down, I'm not going to let my family down. If the Dream Act passes my parents or not, I'm probably not going to qualify for those benefits. Does that mean that I'm going to forget about them? Are there 10 million people in this country who, you know, are growing our food, taking care of children, you know, making sure that they clean our hotels and are essentially a very big backbone of our economy? No, I'm going to continue to fight because, you know, that's the beauty of this country. You know, we come here to essentially pursue whatever dream we set out for ourselves for. And my dream is to make sure that the parents, children, the families who are in fear of being separated or deported back to a home country that they may fear for their safety in, or that they may no longer have ties to, are given an opportunity at least to experience what it means to live the American dream.
This brought up a lot of things in my own mind while I was listening to Juan talk. And, well, there are 2 main things. The first one being, instead of, you know, just the human aspect of it, just the whatever people think about race or immigration, whatever, think about how expensive this is. What we're talking about here is taxpayer dollars, right? I mean, if we forget about everything else, let's get down to the brass tacks. What is it actually going to cost us? You know, especially if we have a police force going after these people who are, to be honest with you, just trying to go about their daily lives. The second thing, I think that this issue is a lot of times dismissed as being something like, well, we've got laws. You know, we can't let undocumented immigrants just be here, right? That's just the easy dismissal, the lazy way of going about it, right? And granted, we do have laws and we have to have immigration policies in place. That's obvious. But I think we need to take into account all of these things, especially what Juan is he's making some great points that we definitely need to take into account. And not only that, I think we should remember how this country came into existence. We weren't here first, unless you happen to be a person who's Native American listening to this. Well, you were here first. Native Americans were here first. And guess what happened there? It was genocide. They were almost completely wiped out. So we need to remember that. I know that's part of history. That's a long time ago, but not so long ago that we can just do whatever the hell we want now. Let's not regress. That's my main point here. Anyway, I just kind of had to talk about all of these things with Juan and get his reaction.
Yeah, no, totally. And to me personally, you know, as a beneficiary of the DACA program, somebody that could potentially that, you know, if the government, I guess, really wanted to, especially the Trump administration, they could probably, you know, obviously come after me fairly quickly. I mean, my information's out there. I think through the years, that I've done this work, I've been guided by that very simple principle that, if there's information out there that could help someone, go to that school that they want to enroll in, or there's information out there that, there's a state law somewhere. I live in Florida, but, through this work, I've familiarized myself with various state governments. So if there is an opportunity for that student to obtain a driver's license through their state, through their own state laws, or if there is an opportunity for them to become engaged in local and state government and, advocate for a specific piece of legislation and just help it along that much further, those are important things. And, it's not just so for the benefit, like a driver's license is a benefit that I feel that oftentimes people forget, how valuable that piece of plastic in your pocket really is. We're talking about something that gives you the ability to go from point A to point B comfortably as long as you do it responsibly, right? Without fearing that you're going to get stopped by the police and then be told, driver's license and insurance, please, don't have one. You may be subjected to deportation and the game is over right there and then. And that's the life and the fear of millions of people in this country. And right now, specifically, it's the life and fear of 800,000 people who, starting March, are going to gradually start losing the ability to drive, to work, and to, quite frankly, be able to contribute back to the country and the communities that they love. And I think, something when we're having this conversation about, practicality, what it looks like to support 800,000 people, going door to door, I should probably correct myself because, the DACA program gives you one more thing. And I failed to mention this and I apologize, but it does give you a social security number, which means to be in good standing for this program, you have to pay your taxes, period, end of story, right? And you can pay your taxes for those who also may not be attuned to, even when you're undocumented. And some people may say, whoa, how is that possible? Well, I'm going to tell you what, the IRS doesn't really care whether you have legal standing or not. They just care that you pay your taxes. And, for somebody, like my family, thankfully for us, we've had a social security all along. And, that may shock some people, but that's quite frankly the truth. We've had a valid social security number due to the visa that we came here with. And, we can get into the specifics of my case and, why that is late, a little bit further. But for those people who, are able to, because sometimes it really comes down to a decision as to whether or not you're able to even afford to do that or put food on the table or cover living expenses. If you, are undocumented in the United States and you go to the IRS and you say, I want to pay my taxes, they'll give you something called an ICN number or an ID number or like a tax ID number that you can pay your taxes through. So, when it comes to practicality, are you going to deport people who are actually paying their taxes, who are covered under this program? Are you going to deport their families who may have been able to go ahead and pitch in their fair share as well, who are not, and I may add, they're not going to see the benefits because guess what? They're undocumented. They don't qualify for, Medicaid, Medicare, or any sort of federal program when it comes to that kind of stuff. We can't even apply for the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. We're not really eligible for that. So you have to really, really think through this kind of stuff. And that's why, I like to have these difficult conversations with people, and specifically with people that may disagree with me. As long as we're not shouting and we're listening with our ears wide open, I feel that there is some common ground there. Is it going to take time? Is it going to be difficult? Are some people going to be more difficult than others to come to an understanding? Yeah, absolutely. We're not going to deal with 100% everything. But fundamentally speaking, when it comes down to this program, when it comes down to people like myself, when it comes down to, passing the DREAM Act and essentially allowing us the opportunity to fully integrate into the society, look, there's Republicans that agree, there's Democrats that agree. All I'm saying is that there's also plenty of celebrities that agree, plenty of business leaders that agree, and, everybody else in between who sees this as a smart investment into the future of this country.
I wanted to get his thoughts on what some more common misconceptions were about immigration, about all of this in general, because I feel like there are more than we probably realize.
Yeah, there's plenty. I mean, I think when we first started chatting, I spoke about, this line. People often shout at immigrants and say, well, why don't you just get in line and wait your turn like everybody else? There's this line that exists somewhere in this country, and, I myself haven't found it, and I'm determined to. And the reason, what I'm even joking about this, because Islam is a myth. It doesn't exist. Right. There is no way for anybody in this 11 million people to actually go out there and get in the line. If you told me, right, and I joked about this, about there being like an obstacle course, there was the way to get into the line is like through this really hard obstacle course, and that's how you get in the line. People will probably go ahead and take the time, train, and run through the obstacle course.
Right. Yeah, of course.
But this is not getting a passport application down at the post office, filling it out, and, sending it back and paying a fee. It just doesn't work like that. Yeah. Right. My parents don't have the opportunity to become a U.S. citizen, even if they tried. Like, even if you literally told them that they have to take a test and study really hard and pay back the taxes, there is no line. And, that's why we need comprehensive immigration reform, so that there can be a line, people can wait their turn, pay back taxes, and, whatever other stipulations the government puts in this bill. But right now, this whole notion that immigrants don't want to get in line and they don't want to wait their turn and they just want the quote unquote free stuff, like, Jeb Bush one time famously said, there is no line. There is no free stuff. We don't come to the United States and get I think it was Sarah Palin who said this one time, that, people, when they come across the border, they get a free soccer ball. None of that exists. It is just literally misconception and extreme rhetoric to feed into the fears that the stranger or the foreigner, right, somehow wants to get ahead of everybody else. One time I visited, the great state of Ohio, and, I love it out there. It's beautiful. And I engaged in a conversation with a couple of individuals, and I remember hearing something that was particularly striking. And these individuals, had the very big misconception that, even if you were undocumented, you were entitled to apply for, a franchise, like a store, like a mini mart, and that, the government itself did, turn a blind eye on you, and you did not have to pay taxes, and they just handed those as long as you were a foreigner, and that somehow U.S. citizens were being cheated out of applying for the same kind of stuff. And none of that is true. None of that is true. And it just shows you, right, how far and twisted, a lot of these arguments that are made against immigrants are taken just so that people have this boiled down notion that we're out here trying to just, rob them of their livelihood. When instead, just to mention, a lot of immigrants work day and night, pay their taxes, do right by the law for a chance to just even stay here under the radar, like my parents. My parents are, I wish more people could meet my parents, because there has to be a person to this day, that is familiar with their plight or with their struggle or with their fears, that hasn't said, I love your mom and dad. And it's not just because, they're welcoming me into their home, or they treat me like I'm part of the family, or because they have these great barbecues. No, it's because they fundamentally love what they do. They love their job. They own their own business. They love this country. And the only thing that they want is an opportunity to travel and see more of it. And because they don't have an ID, they're unable to do that. But they don't do anything else or do what they do day in and day out, which is sit in here with a smile on their face. And just as my mom and dad do that, millions of other parents who are undocumented take care of their children who are U.S. citizens, and to just pragmatically, just to think, that we could go ahead and destroy, all these families just because we're going to enforce broken immigration laws that, as I mentioned, haven't been updated in decades, then, we really need to start asking ourselves who we are as a nation. Do we recognize what our values really are? And are we willing to take a very close look as to the way that we are trying to enforce, something that is broken, A, and B, examine the cost of it, or are we just going to let all those things go by, including our humanity, and say that this person doesn't belong here because he or she may sound different than me, he or she may belong to a different religion, he or she didn't get in line, and then just let them go?
I thought it pertinent to ask at this point in time if he thought there were any actual rational arguments from the other side of the spectrum. Maybe not on the polar opposite end, but I'm talking about, just some of the more rational, maybe somewhere in the middle type of arguments. People who don't necessarily agree all the way with him, but have some valid concerns about immigration.
I think that there's some misconceptions out there, and I think it falls. I don't want to, go into right versus wrong, because even this debate starts like all kinds of. It encompasses a lot of things that, unfortunately, I fear that we don't have the time to get into it. But
yeah, right.
I do think that the far right and all these groups that try to demonize immigrants often do so with a broad stroke. They try to paint us all in one light, that we're criminals, that we're just trying to get by a few jobs and whatnot. And oftentimes what happens is that it gets coupled that, are there bad people in this country? Yeah, there's bad people all over the world, period.
Sure.
You may not like your neighbor. And sometimes, unfortunately, these bad people do really bad things. And some of those things are indefensible completely. And that person should 100% be, subjected to the law and be deported. And I feel almost as if at times, there's this notion that just because you're an immigrant, then you must sympathize with that person, and you must also want to, keep him or her in the country. I think, to fully answer your question without deviating, is essentially that not all immigrants are bad. Are there people who should be removed from this country who pose a threat to society and to national security? Yeah, absolutely. Am I going to defend those people just because they're immigrants? No. We need to be sensible as to what exactly is happening out there.
Yeah.
And I think, this is the give and take, right? It's like deport them all, or, really understand what they're doing, what they're not doing, and reform our immigration system so that it works in a way that's smart towards enforcement, so that we can get the really bad people out of here. The, gang members and, people who have committed, some very heinous crimes, and, really address the situation, while understanding that within those layers of immigrants, there's also hardworking people that want to get in that so-called line, that want to, file that application and pay their taxes and live free from the fear of constantly being deported from the home that they may have purchased, or deported from the community where they, help their neighbors. And I will challenge people to essentially start thinking about, essentially, what does it look like to have all these people removed from this country? Is your neighbor undocumented? Maybe he or she is your best friend, and you may not know that. And you may have been neighbors for decades. And the truth of the matter is that neighbor may not be comfortable, to share as much information, as much of their story as I am with your listeners. But the truth is that there's 11 million people out there, myself included, who are fearful of this administration and the tactics that they're employing to carry out their extreme anti-immigrant agenda. And within that 11 million, there's almost 1 million people who are essentially caught in between the system, because the program that the federal government implemented under the Obama era is now being pulled away from them, and there's no solution or affirmation or guarantee that Congress or the president is going to act in a timely manner to fix it, which is why, it's going to be up to a lot of us, the beneficiaries of this program, but also, legal permanent residents, U.S. citizens, people who are listening to this podcast can help alleviate a lot of fear and fix this issue if they pick up the phone, they call their member of Congress, they call both of their senators, and essentially ask them to pass a clean dream act today, tomorrow, the next day. And this is the same exercise that we've been doing, since Donald Trump got inaugurated, as president of the United States. It's no different than that, except that they have changes. And, in a democratic society, it should be a responsibility to make sure that the staffers and our members of Congress know who we are by name. What I always tell my friends here in Florida is that, what can I do to help? I wish I could do more. Everything that you need to do is that you wake up, you pour your coffee, you make 3 very simple phone calls. My name is Juan Escalante. I'm calling Marco Rubio and asking him to support the DREAM Act. My friend Daniel is a DACA recipient, and he needs the DREAM Act to continue to stay in this country. Please support the DREAM Act. Thank you so much for your time. And if you do that 3 times every morning, I assure you, and you recruit other people to do the same, we wouldn't need 6 months. We will probably do it in a lot shorter time, but we need the pressure. And we will have a very tight timeline between now and March 5th, if you consider the amount of breaks that Congress takes to go back to the district and to the constituents.
I wanted to take this time to remind you that if you are a dreamer or if you know someone who is, and that person or you need to go and renew before October 5th, well, the clock is ticking. So please go ahead and do that. If you're a friend or you have a family member who needs to go do that, then I urge you to just let them know. Maybe, it's possible they don't know, and then it might be too late. And we just don't need any more added anxiety to our current state of affairs with everything that's going on in the country and the world. Plenty of good, but some things that are, we'll just say, a little bit stressful. All right, now it's time to try and find out exactly, who this guy is. Who is Juan Escalante? So I ask him right now what an average day looks like for him.
Oh, man. That's just pretty boring. I just open my computer and I start typing. I'm just joking. I guess the best way that I could put this would be to ask people to kind of close your eyes and visualize the following. Imagine that you wake up every morning and you don't know whether your mom and dad are safe. You have to essentially breathe in, wake up, shoot them a text, give them a call, and make sure that they're okay. Once you finish that, you're essentially recharged for the day. You move on to the next worry, which is whether or not they're going to make it to work. And the same thing for your siblings, because you live far away from them. You can't essentially get to them. And even if you could get to them, say that you lived in the same city, there's not much you can do if they're taken into custody. So you deal with that, from morning until night. And at the same time, you have to go ahead and you have to get ready for work. But parallel to that, you start wondering, well, is my work permit going to expire? And if it expires, what am I going to do? What am I going to tell my boss? How am I going to pay the bills? So after getting ready for work, you make breakfast, you open your computer like I do, you sit down and you're immediately showered with, what I want to say reality. And reality looks like a couple of things. It looks like the really bad and negative press and aspects that are often attributed to immigrants. So you have the Trump supporters, you have, laws like Breitbart, and then you have, Congress to deal with, a separate sphere altogether. You start imagining, am I doing enough to protect my community? Am I writing enough? Am I sending enough emails? Am I calling enough people? Is my organization doing enough? What's going to happen, if this bill passes or doesn't pass? I'm talking about the DREAM Act. What does it look like for me? And I guess, obviously those are a lot of worries and stuff like that. But in between all that, it's a lot of going back and forth. You have a Slack channel where you communicate with, beneficiaries from across the country. And at the same time, you have 100 emails, that are happening really quickly because your job depends a lot on the media cycles. You have to respond to stuff. So if a senator says this or says that, how do you respond? What do you say? What do you don't say? Then you start thinking about ways to engage the community. And then, you want to do an action demand where you can travel to demand. So you want to make sure that you have coordinators. You get on phone calls. You go to meetings. You do video chats. You do interviews like this one. And then at the end of the day, you close your computer. You have been texting with your mom and dad. They're okay. They're on the way back home. They promise you that they're going to call you when they get there to make sure that, they haven't been stopped by the police. You make sure your brothers are okay. And you start, essentially preparing for dinner. And then through all that, you may start scrolling through Twitter. You may find a case of a mother that was deported, away from her children. You might find a case of a father of 4 U.S. citizens who may have been deported away from his children in rural Ohio. And that starts to weigh on you because it's really hard for you to not start feeling that even though you're enjoying dinner, that your parents are safe, that there's people out there who will continue to live in fear. So you take a shower, you get ready for bed, and somehow you just convince yourself that you have to do it all over again the next day because you have to be brave and because you want to make sure that other people understand that even as really horrific things are happening around us, that we cannot stand still, that we cannot keep quiet, and that we can continue to fight the next day until, we win this fight.
We're just about to the 1 hour mark with this episode. So per my MO with the In the Shoes of podcast, I have to ask Juan if he were visited by an alien and was given about 5 minutes to answer the question of what does life mean here on Earth? How do you view it? What's the purpose of humans here? And Juan came back with this.
You mean after I showed them a bunch of memes to try to explain the situation?
Yeah. Hey, but let's go. Let's begin with memes. This is a new one, so I love the novelty here. Let's go.
I'm just saying, like, an alien comes down, what are you supposed to do? Just straight up, talk to them and be like, hey, what, I feel like I would be freaked out. And more importantly, why me? This is a random person in Central Park. But
you could just say, Trump, you may want to watch out for our government right now. They don't really, are you a legal alien immigrant from another planet or not? Anyway, sorry.
No, I think it's one of those things. No, you're good. I think for me, it's just one of those things where, what it feels like to be, in this world right now is just, obviously we take a lot of challenges, and sometimes they really do seem like they're getting worse and worse, but I think there's some value in the human spirit of fighting for what you believe in fundamentally, whether you're on the left or the right, or whether you're right or you're wrong. So we may be a nation that argues quite a bit, but at the end of the day, we just want to make sure that, we continue to build in one way or another and continue to fight for what we believe in, whatever that may be.
Sure. And let's say the alien had one more question for you. And the alien asked, well, do you feel like there are more, as you put it, good people as opposed to bad people? Is there more of that human spirit that you talk of, or is there more of the kind of darkness, for lack of a better word?
I don't know. I mean, listen, I'm one of those people. I just try to see the good in everybody. Yep. And I do think that everybody has at least an ounce of good in them. It's just what they do with it, or whether or not the truth is exhibited. So I don't think it's something to quantify, good versus bad. I think, it's kind of like that saying goes, actions speak louder than words. So, everybody's good and everybody's equally bad, when it comes down to it. It's just how much of that goodness or that badness you try to exhibit.
Hey, thank you so much for checking out this episode of In the Shoes Of. If you like or don't like the podcast, feel free to leave a review or reach out to me. My email is jnickel42@gmail.com. Can't promise you I'll get back to you right away, but I'll definitely try and get to it. Anyway, thank you so much for checking it out. Until the next time, see you later.